Okay, so then that means that we should take a really hard look at some of the positive trends.
Right.
You
Let's do
know,
that.
so yeah, I mean, I'm writing these books for an intellectual movement that I wanted to be a part of and support. And after I got done writing them, there's no more, that movement no longer exists, which was the intellectual dark web, of which you guys are clearly members. And I don't even care if you agree, because I just go, you're IDW, I say so. But I mentioned this to Joe Rogan, and he was, what's that?
I said we've been conscripted into it by you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, you're in it. And Joe was like, no, like, that's a stupid word. That's a stupid name. And I was like, okay, maybe, but like, it's like you kind of go, it's stupid, but yet we all know who's in it. Like, we all, like, you can kind of go, there's like, and I was even drawing these, like I was like, okay, there's like the pro-vaxxer IDW types, and then there's the anti-vax IDW types, and it basically overlaps with who likes Trump and who doesn't, you know. And it's like, is it IDW left and right, or is it like relationship to government? But you kind of go, you know, okay. And then there's some people that don't like each other that are in it. That's part of it, right? But nonetheless, I go, there's something clearly going on that I think is intellectual, you know, that is like a salon, that's podcasts, that's long, that's what Daniel Kahneman calls slow thinking. It's you know, it's not Fox News. You know, there might be parts of Tucker Carlson that are IDW, but it's not. It's long form. It's podcast. It's thoughtful. It has a kind of it's totally fine with gays and lesbians, and frankly with trans people. But it will push back against crazy trans activists and crazy. You know, it believes in climate change. It thinks climate change is a concern. We should do something about it, but it's anti-apocalyptic. It's pushing back against the new religion. It's pushing back against the new dogmatism. I think it's very serious. I think it's a very significant group of people. It's, you know, it's, everyone knows who it is. It's Barry Weiss. It's Nellie Bowles. It's Joe Rogan. It's Jordan Peterson. It's
Brett and Heather.
Brett and Heather. It's Claire Lehman and Quillette, even though those guys hate each other right now because they're fighting about COVID. And part of me goes, you know, it's not going to go away. In fact, it's going to become endemic. It is becoming endemic. But as an issue of debate, it's going to become a lot smaller. And afterwards, there's still going to be the IDW, and Heather and Claire will become friends again, or maybe not, but they'll still be in the IDW, and there's still a kind of. So I kind of go, that is real. And as soon as you describe who's in it and the thinking there, you can kind of go, well, it may not be mainstream. It may not be the center of the Overton window right now, but it's driving this debate. It's actually leading the conversation. The New York Times is describing, you know, I think Chris Rufo is this really interesting person who I've gotten to know, but who's been basically single-handedly taking down critical race theory in the United States. You know, he identifies at this point as Republican and conservative, but he's just clearly not like your dad's Republican, right? And so, or what about a guy like Glenn Greenwald? You know, like sometimes I read Glenn Greenwald, I'm like, he hasn't changed anything in his view. Like his views are identical to what they were when I was reading him after 9/11. Like I can't figure out anything he's changed his mind on. Still an anti-imperialist socialist, as far as I can tell. But yet you kind of go, it's probably something that has changed. You know, like I think there's something happening where us on the IDW side of things, or on the kind of IDW left, go, hey, I don't think crime is progressive or liberal. It seems like all the victims are like poor African American, you know, like, or, you know, disadvantaged people. Like crime is bad. And then you're kind of like, well, that's a pretty mainstream view that crime is bad. And actually the idea that crime is not bad is completely marginal. And so you go, well, IDW folks are articulating, I think, a new mainstream view. It's a practical view. It's pragmatic. Joe Rogan's not proselytizing ivermectin, but he took it, and you kind of go, there's some folks in this movement that you kind of go, you sound kind of dogmatic, dude. And probably I sound that way to people on things like nuclear power, but you kind of go, yeah, ivermectin may not be the right solution. Vaccines, I think, are great. I'm a big proponent of vaccines, but I also kind of go, how much more pressure are we going to put on members of our society to get it? And so you get to some kind of practice. I think you were sort of saying, Konstantin, like there's a practicalness here in the IDW. I think the best of the IDW that we want to hold on to, and a kind of populism too.
Yeah, Michael.
That I think I want to hold on. And so I go, that's where when I look for hope, I go, that's where I find the hope. It's in this new media IDW cluster.
The one thing I hope we can retain, now that you've conscripted us into that, you're the first person to ever suggest that we are in the IDW, and I gratefully accept that with all the consequences that it brings. But
yes.
The one thing that I think is very important as a new member of the IDW is tolerance of people with different views. That's the one thing that will break it if it's not maintained. Yes. And I think COVID is rapidly stress testing that sense that, look, I love Brett and Heather. I consider them friends. I'm honored that they consider us friends. I think they're wonderful people. Having listened to the stuff, on balance, I'm not sure, based on what I've read and the people I've spoken with, I'm not convinced that ivermectin is the answer to this issue. I like Joe. I think he's really cool as well. If I got COVID, I wouldn't take ivermectin myself, but I'm okay with Joe taking it. I think the fact that Brett thinks it's a good idea, well, that's up to him. There's a respect for difference of opinion. To me, that used to be the sign of intelligent people, that they're able to disagree about important things and retain friendships and retain mutual respect. And that's my only hope, is that we don't lose that in this process. And I do see one or two people straying into territory, which I do think is unhelpful in that respect.
Yeah, I agree. And so, and you kind of go, it might be that, look, because of course, if IDW is just, we're a bunch of people that are open-minded, then it's not really like a thing. You know what I mean? Then it's just a bunch of nice people that have podcasts, and that's fine. And part of me was just more ambitious in the sense that, I kind of was like, here's what I think the IDW should be, in both Apocalypse Never and in San Francisco. Like, I'm going to have the argument. I mean, I'm kind of like, I don't know, whatever, I'm not sure what it would mean to not be tolerant, but certainly I'll have the debate or argument with anybody about the ideas in the book. But for me, I think the potential of something like the IDW is to have a view of these things. And that doesn't mean that you're like kicking people out of the cool kids club because they are ivermectin users. But it would be kind of more like, yeah, there's kind of a recognizably IDW take on that. And that may not be possible. And if it's not, that's totally fine. Just, happy to be, having these conversations. But it does feel to me like IDW had the potential to be something like the classic intellectual movement of late was really the neocons that came out of the radical left, where there was this really influential movement, the neocons, that gave rise to Reagan and Thatcher, and that there was needing to be something like that again to kind of revive a moribund, call it center-right politics for lack of a better descriptor, but something that was not exactly Trumpy, but appreciated some of Trump's interventions in the culture, not socialist, but maybe appreciated some things that Bernie Sanders was saying, and the need for things like universal healthcare, universal psychiatry, that kind of thing, and that there would be something at the end of it that was like a recognizable agenda. That's part of my ambition. It may not be something that we can realize, but for me, I kind of have some faith that once I get everybody in the IDW to read my books, we'll get you all to agree that that's the right IDW agenda.